Hey everybody, welcome back to Travel Trailer Nation. This post has been a long time coming as we had planned much earlier than this to get to Caprock Canyons State Park. It just never developed, but we did finally get a chance to get there. And so I wanted to give you guys kind of a recap of the trip there and what the park is like. So if you have a desire to go there, you'll at least know what you're headed into. First, let's talk about why this trip was important to us for a couple of reasons. One, the Delta has only had one shakedown trip so far, and not that we didn't have more planned, it's just that here in North Texas in the spring is not great for travel. There's a lot of thunderstorms, and if you have a German Shepherd that's afraid of thunder, chances are you're probably not going to go out in the thunderstorms to camp. I mean, camping in storms is not great fun anyway. But in any event, we had to cancel some trips, and of course, canceling's easy. Adding new trips on, not so much. She's being very mischievous today. I think she's happy to be home. So the first thing we wanted to really learn from this trip then was, do we have any other issues with the Delta? And aside from that, we kind of wanted to get the lay of the land with Caprock Canyons State Park because my grandson's going to be down here in June, and then in July we head north to get him back home in Wisconsin, but we're going to make some side trips along the way. So that whole trip probably take, somewhere around 10 days, but Caprock Canyon is the first stop on that trip. So we kind of wanted to know what it would be like for Trent when we head up there. So we'll eventually end up in Wisconsin for 3 weeks, and then we're going back to Dodge City, which was another trip that got canceled because of storms last year. All right, so on with the trip, and I think maybe from this point forward, I'll just show pictures and talk about it because there were so many great views there that I just want to kind of throw them up so you can see them. It's a fantastic campground and a fantastic park. So we left home a little after 9 a.m. and we knew that we had about 6 hours ahead of us with Eva because we've got to make gas stops, and then when we make a gas stop, we have a potty break for her. And everything went really good until we left Wichita Falls, Loves. So from here to Loves is about 300 feet elevation difference, not a big deal. But once we left Loves, going to Quittacay, which is where the campground is outside of, that is another 2,200 feet of elevation, which you go, well, that's not much because it's over 160 miles. It's true, but it does have an impact. And not only that, the winds we ran into leaving Wichita Falls heading to Caprock Canyons were borderline bad. And so much so that I had actually said to Tammy at one point, if it gets any worse, I'm just going to pull off and we'll just have to wait until evening when things die down and go on again. But we did have to reduce our mileage. But even with that, we went from getting over, I would say we were getting like somewhere between 11.3 miles per gallon and up on the way to Wichita Falls. And then when we left Wichita Falls, that mileage between the wind and, this, elevation, we went down to 8 miles a gallon. I don't know that I've ever gotten 8 miles to the gallon with the Ram diesel, and I was driving, somewhere between 55 and 60 because of the wind. So, take that for what it's worth. That was not pleasant to get that kind of gas mileage, but that's just the way it is. Once we got into Quittacay, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. It doesn't look like it should be pronounced that way, but that's what I've heard it's pronounced. So once we got in there, notice it's a very old town. There's a couple old towns on the way there, but it's a very old town. There's not a lot there. There is a Valero. Has actually had a really good price on diesel, which I was surprised about since it's like out in the middle of nowhere. They have a small grocery store that has just about everything you'd ever want. And it looks like there's a few diners in the town, but nothing that was open whenever we were in town. So very small. But outside of that town, I would say maybe 3 to 5 miles down the road is where you'll enter Caprock Canyons State Park. You'll get to the headquarters building. Looks brand new. Looks like there was one further up the road at one point. Looks very new. You park. It's got a huge parking lot. Park your rig. You'll walk in kind of behind the building to check in. The folks there are great. It's got a little store, but I wouldn't call it a store. I would call it more of kind of a souvenir center. They've got walking sticks and t-shirts and some mugs, and I think that's about it. So you're not going to get any supplies there. If you need supplies, you're going to have to go into town and probably hunt for them, or maybe head to a larger town. But the folks there are real nice. The check-in process is smooth, and you go on your way. Now, one thing I do want to tell you is that they will give you a map, and if you're going to like our loop, the Honey Flat Loop, on the map, it looks like you're going to leave their building and you're going to go about 100 yards and you're going to be there. It's not the case. It's a bit of a drive from there, so much so that I was worried when we got out and on our way that we must have turned the wrong way, because there's no reason why we should be driving this far based on what the map looks like. And I was already starting to get that sick feeling like, where am I going to find a place to turn around? But we were on the right course, and after about, 6 or 7 minutes, we saw a sign for the loop that we were in, and we pulled in, backed in, and we got things all set up while Eva sat patiently in the truck waiting for us. The outlook for the weather for the period that we were going to be there looked really good. With the exception of the second day, which was going to be, I guess at first they were forecasting 92. I don't know whether it got to that or not, but the main concern was the winds that day, which were going to be gusting to 37 miles an hour. And as it turned out, the heat wasn't horrible. One of the nice features about the Delta is that they have the easy start on there, so you can, if you want, run both of your air conditioners on 30 amp. Now, we were in a 30 amp site. There are 50 amp sites there, but nothing that we could snag when we were making our reservation. And actually, I'm quite impressed with the chill cube that the Delta has. It did a really nice job. We didn't really run the bedroom unit for very long at all. Now, I'm not sure that there's really a bad site in that Honey Flat Loop, except maybe Site 1. And the only reason I say that is if you're in Site 1, the site that is next to you, Site 3, even though they're set back a ways, they can see directly into your site. So I would say of all the sites there, that would be one that I wouldn't want. And it was kind of funny because even one of the people up at the office had said Site 1 was like her least favorite of any of the sites, mainly because it was on, bordered the road coming into the loop. And of course that doesn't bother me. And there's a lot of shrubbery and bushes there that you wouldn't even see the road. But my main concern was just if we were to ever get that site, not having enough privacy. And most of the other sites are really quite private. The sites are really level side to side. The only issue that we had, and you'll see in the picture, is that the pads that they have are a little elevated from the soil. So in our case, we actually ended up having to build a bottom step out of some blocks just to bridge that gap. And I don't think with the Delta being as high as it is, because it's higher than the Imagine was, that a 3-step Moride stairs was ever really a good idea for Delta. That's my takeaway from this trip anyway. And so we've ordered an add-a-step to put on there for just such occasions, and I'm sure we'll run into more than just Caprock. But that is a little bit of a concern, when you get into an area where you might have an asphalt pad that drops a few inches down, and then you find that last step is just, a pretty big step. So we built a step out of blocks. It worked fine the whole time we were there. And then once we got everything level, I did all the peripheral stuff like setting up the satellite TV, and I set up the Starlink. And you'll want Starlink if you're there. Your odds of having cell coverage, if you're lucky in that loop, is probably 1 bar. Once you get out on the road in the campground, I think you'll get more bars than that. But in that loop, you'd be lucky to get a bar. So keep that in mind. It's probably, after being there for about a week, I would say it's probably one of my favorite campgrounds now. I even like it better than Palo Duro for a number of reasons, but the main reason being I think that the views as you walk the trails it's much nicer, I think. And the campground itself is, our loop at least, was much nicer and very quiet. And so just from a visual standpoint, I think it's a much better park. The one thing you need to realize, though, is that what they're built upon is this really fine, powdery, orangish sand. And calling it sand is probably not correct, but it gets everywhere, and it's windy there most of the time. So, before we left, and you'll want a mat outside your trailer, but before we left, I washed the floor down, and it was filthy. And we got home, and I went through the trailer again, and I washed the floor and everything, and man, it was disgusting. And I think that's just a combination of that orange powdery soil combined with the winds. It just makes a mess, but believe me, it's still worth it regardless. And beyond the trail, beyond just the views you get on the trails, it's the fact that there's so much trail to walk, and which is great for Eva. She just absolutely loves going on hikes, and she loves barking, as you can hear right now. So again, it's just a great campground, and I will say this: the first thing you're going to notice when you get there is the incredible amount of buffalo scat that's everywhere. I don't think you can walk 5 or 10 feet and not see it. And you would think with all of that scat everywhere that you're going to see buffalo just, coming through all the time, or herds of them. And that's just not the case, at least not for us. And we were there a week, even with all the hiking that Eva and I did on the trails. When her and I were together, we never saw one buffalo, and we were doing the Canyon Rim Trail daily. A couple times we did it twice during the day. And only once, when Tammy and I and Eva were together, did we see a buffalo, and it came behind us, probably maybe 50, 75 yards behind us, and was walking down towards the campground. So you're going to see buffalo, though. We had one come through the back of our campground the next day, and I was just sitting out there with Eva, and she let out a low growl, and I thought she was probably seeing someone walking a dog by the campsite. But then I noticed she was looking behind us, so I turned around, and there was a buffalo probably 50 feet behind us, just walking behind our campsite, and he kept moving. He didn't stop at all. And I yelled out to Tammy. She didn't hear me, but I did get a video, which I posted on the YouTube channel. And that would not be the last time we'd see a buffalo near our site. Actually, the next day, we went out in the truck to drive around some of the campground to see what there was available. And when we came back, there was a buffalo on our site, at the front of our site. And we had to wait at another campsite that was unoccupied for about 30 minutes before it decided to move along. And then we basically got back into our trailer. But so you're going to see buffalo. Now, you would think with all the scat that's around there that, you aren't going to have any problems with flies at your site, but it's going to be quite the opposite. There's a lot of flies there. It's not terrible, but you would think, gee, with all that scat, they'd probably leave you alone, but they won't. So anyway, that's kind of it for the buffalo, I think. So you will see buffalo. Don't be discouraged if you go a couple days and don't. You probably will. Just keep in mind that they are very active at just before dawn and just before dusk. So if you're in the habit of walking your dog early in the morning before the sun comes up, have a nice flashlight and be careful. And also, they recommend staying 50 yards back. We saw someone violate that rule when we were on the trail and that buffalo was behind us. This guy decided he was going to try and get a picture, and the buffalo didn't appreciate it, and he eventually backed off. But just a word to the wise is sufficient. So, if there's any negatives to this park, there would only be two. One's not a big deal at all, but it's just something for you to know. They have a third-party store there. So when I talked about the gift shop, basically, that's a third-party store. So you're not going to get your 10% discount with your Texas State Pass. Not that that's a big deal, but it's just something you should know going in. And I would say that the second is really just kind of a heads up about the terrain there. That canyon rim trail that we take doesn't have much of an elevation to it. So it's a very, I would say, easy walkable trail. But keep in mind, if you have a dog, that there are a lot of cactus along the edge. And Eva's very curious, of course. And she put her nose into one and ended up with probably 5 or 6 cactus quill in there. They come off the plants real easy, but I'll tell you what, they are very hard to pull out of a dog's snout. So I guess I was a bad dad. I didn't think she'd gotten that close, but she certainly did. So we were there for 6 days. We were actually slated there to be 7. But there was a bad storm rolling into North Texas for the day that we would leave there to come home. And as you guys know, I am not big about traveling into storms. So we left a day early, and I was fine with that. It was either that or add 2 more days on, I think. And at that point, I was just like, let's go home and we'll take the day loss. As far as the trailer went, did we find anything dramatically wrong with the trailer on this trip? And keep in mind, I think round trip, we were looking at like 700 miles or maybe, pushing 800 miles. So there's a lot of travel involved. And then we were there for a week and, really didn't run into anything at all except the solar panel. And I don't know whether that's user error or not. The battery part of that panel works just fine. I can pull up the app and I can see that the battery's charging and what it's charging at. Now, the solar part of it, though, does not seem to be generating, and I'm not sure why that is. So that's something I need to have them check and find out. It was really generating nothing, and it was turned on. So I checked the fuse. It wasn't the fuse. I went up on the roof and I checked the connections at the panel, and they look good. So who knows? I didn't really feel like doing anything more than that. The only reason that even came up at all is we had a 2-hour unplanned, for them at the campground, apparently it was a planned outage, but they never notified anyone that they were going to be turning the power off for a couple hours. So we were just sitting there and all of a sudden we went dead. And so I called up to the office and they said, oh yeah, we're going to be, it's planned. We're going to be out for a couple hours. So then I thought, well, I'll just turn the solar on. But yeah, that was a no-go. So that was kind of it. I think we're prepared now for what we'll be seeing when we're there in July on our trip to Wisconsin. And there's going to be a couple other trips, before then. So stay tuned for those parks and what we find there. But I'll tell you what, I'm really looking forward to going back there again. Really, really nice campground. So hope this helps. Hope you enjoyed the pictures. And until next time, happy camping.